I was reading a book alone in a room. It was a quiet winter evening when I decided to spend some time alone, away from the distractions of my phone and the internet. I picked up an old book I had bought from a secondhand store years ago. The title and author were faded, but something about the aged, leather-bound cover intrigued me. Sitting in my dimly lit room, I turned the first page. It was empty. Thinking it might be some old custom, I flipped to the next one. It was blank too. Confused, I thumbed through the entire book, and to my astonishment, every single page was blank, except for the very last one. On that page was a handwritten note in crimson ink. "You shouldn't have opened this book." A chill ran down my spine. I was alone, or at least I thought so. Suddenly, the lamp flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The silence in the room deepened, and I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I tried to laugh it off, convincing myself it was some kind of prank by the previous owner. But just as I was about to close the book, the words on the page began to change. The crimson ink morphed and twisted to form new sentences. "You are not alone." My hands trembled, and I dropped the book. It fell open to the first page, which was now no longer blank. A single word was scrawled across it: "Run." Before I could react, the door to my room slammed shut with a deafening bang. The light went out completely, and I was plunged into darkness. A faint whisper echoed through the room, as if someone was standing right behind me, breathing heavily. I dared not turn around, but in the reflection of the glass on the book's cover, I saw them, two glowing eyes staring at me. I froze, unable to breathe as the glowing eyes in the reflection seemed to burn into my soul. The whisper grew louder, and now I could make out faint words. "You opened the door? You let it in?" I clutched the book like a shield, my fingers trembling against its cold leather cover. The room grew colder with every passing second, my breath forming clouds in the air. The sound of footsteps began to echo in the darkness, circling me, deliberate and slow. I forced myself to whisper, "Who's there?" The whisper replied, this time clearer and right by my ear, "Your shadow has been waiting for this moment." Suddenly, I felt a tug on my shoulder. I spun around, swinging the book blindly. My room was empty. No figure, no eyes, just a suffocating void of silence. But the whisper didn't stop. It was inside my head now, repeating the same word over and over. "Run, run, run." I staggered back, trying to find the door. My fingers fumbled in the dark, until I felt the cold brass of the doorknob. I twisted it desperately, but it wouldn't budge. The voice began to laugh, a low, guttural sound that felt like nails scraping against my sanity. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the book was glowing faintly. The pages were no longer blank. They were filled with frantic writing, as if someone had scribbled all over them in a frenzy. I lifted it closer to the faint light, and the words leapt out at me. "It's in the walls now. It's in you." A sudden knock thundered against the door, shaking the walls. My heart raced as the knocking grew louder, more aggressive, and then silence. I dared to hope that it was over, but then I heard it again, soft breathing, this time coming from inside the room. My flashlight was on the desk where I had left it. In a desperate act of courage, I reached out, grabbed it, and flicked it on. The beam of light cut through the darkness, landing on the far corner of the room. My blood ran cold. Standing there was a figure, a shadow shaped like me, but taller, twisted, and wrong. Its head tilted unnaturally, and it smiled, showing rows of jagged teeth. "You can't run from yourself," it whispered, stepping closer. My legs felt glued to the floor as the shadow creature approached. Its jagged smile widened, and its hollow eyes burned like embers in the darkness. My flashlight flickered and dimmed, as if its mere presence drained the light from the room. I backed away, clutching the book tightly, but the words on its pages kept changing. "You can't escape. You're already part of it." Panic overtook me, and I did the only thing I could think of. I hurled the book at the shadow. It passed right through the figure and hit the wall with a thud. The shadow laughed, a sound so distorted and inhuman it made my stomach churn. "Don't you see?" It hissed, its voice echoing from every corner of the room. "You read the words. You are the door." The figure lunged forward, and I screamed, dropping to the floor. My hands covered my head as the room spun violently. Then everything stopped. I opened my eyes to find myself sitting in complete silence. The shadow was gone, the book was gone, and the door to my room stood slightly ajar. For a moment, I dared to hope that it had been some terrible hallucination. But when I stood up, I noticed something wrong. The mirror on my wall showed not my reflection, but the shadow's twisted form. Its jagged smile moved in perfect synchronization with mine, its hollow eyes staring into me. In desperation, I grabbed the flashlight and smashed the mirror, shattering it into countless pieces. Yet, even in the fragments scattered across the floor, the shadow's reflection remained. The door behind me slammed shut again, and the whisper returned, louder and more sinister. "You can't run from your own shadow." The pieces of the mirror began to shift, forming words on the ground. "There's only one way to end this." I realized then what it wanted, me. I had brought it into this world, and now it wanted to take my place. My body felt heavy as the whisper grew deafening, echoing inside my skull. My reflection began to move on its own, reaching out toward me from the mirror shards. With a scream, I grabbed grabbed the largest piece of broken glass and held it up. The shadow paused, its smile fading for the first time. "Do you think that will help?" It sneered. Without hesitation, I plunged the shard into my hand. Pain exploded through me as blood dripped onto the floor. The whisper stopped, and the shadow let out a deafening, furious roar. The room shook, and the darkness began to dissolve like smoke. The last thing I saw before passing out was the shadow being dragged back into the fragments of the shattered mirror, screaming in rage. When I woke up, the room was quiet and the mirror was gone. The book, however, was lying on the desk, closed and pristine, as if nothing had happened. I've never opened it again. I don't even know why I kept it, but sometimes late at night, I hear the faint sound of whispers, and I wonder if it's still waiting for me to finish the story. Weeks passed, but the sense of dread never left me. The book sat on my desk, untouched, its leather cover mocking me every time I glanced at it. I tried everything to get rid of it, burning it, burying it, even tossing it into the river. But every time it returned, sitting on my desk as if it had never left. I began to lose sleep. Every shadow in the room seemed to move in ways it shouldn't, and the whispers came back at night, faint but unmistakable. They grew louder with each passing day, until one night they said something new. "Finish it." I didn't know what it meant. Finish what? The book? The story? My own life? The thought of opening the book again sent shivers down my spine. But I couldn't take the whispers anymore. They were in my ears, in the walls, in my very mind. Finally, I decided to confront it. That night I locked my door, turned off all the lights, and lit a single candle. With trembling hands, I opened the book. The pages were no longer blank. They were filled with strange, cryptic symbols that seemed to move and writhe as I stared at them. The crimson ink glowed faintly in the candlelight, and my heart raced as I turned the pages. On the final page, new words appeared before my eyes. "To end this, you must give it a name." A name? What did it mean? I racked my brain, trying to understand. The whispers grew louder, as if urging me to act. My head throbbed, and my vision blurred as a single word formed in my mind, a name I didn't recognize but felt compelled to speak. Eshvar. The moment the name left my lips, the candle went out, and the room was plunged into absolute darkness. A cold wind swirled around me, carrying the shadowy figure back into the room. Its form was clearer now, more human yet more monstrous. It smiled, its jagged teeth gleaming in the faint glow of the book. "You've set me free," it hissed. Before I could react, the figure lunged forward, merging with my shadow on the floor. Pain seared through me as if my very soul was being torn apart. The room spun and I collapsed, losing consciousness. When I woke up, the book was gone, and so was my reflection. The mirror in my room now showed nothing but an empty space where I should be. And then I realized the horrifying truth. I wasn't free. I had traded places. The shadow was now walking in my body, living my life. And I was trapped in the darkness, a prisoner of the book, waiting for someone else to open it. So if you ever find an old leather-bound book with no title, do yourself a favor. Don't open it, because the moment you do, it won't be just a story you're reading. It will be the beginning of your end. I don't know how long I remained trapped. Time doesn't exist in the void where I was imprisoned. The world around me was nothing but darkness, filled with faint whispers of despair from others who had suffered the same fate. But unlike them, I refused to give up. I couldn't accept that my life was over, that my body now belonged to the shadow. One day, or what felt like a day, I heard a faint voice calling out to me. It wasn't a whisper. It was clearer, stronger. It felt familiar. "You're still here, aren't you?" I recognized the voice. It was mine. Somehow my shadow self was speaking to me, taunting me. "You're in my world now, and soon you'll fade into nothing like the others." But this time I noticed something new. The book was there with me, floating in the void, its pages glowing faintly. Desperation turned into determination as I reached for it. The moment my fingers touched the cover, the whispers intensified, but I ignored them and forced the book open. The pages were no longer filled with cryptic symbols. Instead, they revealed instructions, steps to break the curse. Step 1, confront the shadow. Step 2, reclaim your name. Step 3, burn the book. I didn't understand how I could confront the shadow from within the void, but as I read the words, the darkness around me began to ripple. I felt a pull, as if the book itself was drawing me back to my world. Suddenly, I was no longer in the void. I was in my room again, but it wasn't the same. The walls were covered in strange writing, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. Across the room stood my shadow, now fully in control of my body. It turned to face me, its jagged smile stretching impossibly wide. "You think you can take this back?" It hissed, its voice a distorted version of my own. I stepped forward, gripping the book tightly. "This is my life," I said, my voice shaking but resolute. The shadow lunged at me, its claws outstretched. In that moment, I remembered the second step, reclaim your name. I screamed my name at the top of my lungs. The shadow recoiled, its form flickering like a dying flame. "No," it roared. "You can't undo this." But I wasn't done. I threw the book onto the ground and grabbed a lighter from my desk. The shadow thrashed and screamed as I flicked the flame to life and set the book ablaze. The moment the fire touched the pages, the room filled with a blinding light. The shadow let out an ear-piercing scream, its form dissolving into smoke. The walls shook, The air grew colder, and then everything went silent. When I opened my eyes, the book was gone, and my reflection had returned to the mirror. The room was back to normal, as if nothing had ever happened, but I knew better. The curse was broken, yes, but the memory of what happened would stay with me forever. I had reclaimed my life, but at a cost. I would never truly feel safe again. As I left the room, I noticed something on the desk. A single torn page from the book lay there, with one final message written in crimson ink. You may have escaped, but the story never ends. And sometimes, late at night, I still feel a shadow watching me from the corners of the room.